Hi everyone, welcome to Tales of Dread. In this episode, we'll hear from someone who lives near the FBI training academy in Virginia. He thinks that the government is keeping something from him. Then we go to Glacier National Park, where a hiker meets two very strange beings. Then we end with a very strange thing that happened in Yellowstone National Park. Here we go. I think there is something going on that the government or authorities are trying to hide. I say this because I've seen some strange things happening outside my house. I live right next to the FBI training academy in Garrisonville, Virginia. All around the place are woods, and my house backs up to one of these woods. Several groups, like the DEA and the Marine Corps, use this area. My house is a small two-bedroom home with a garage that is separate from the house. There is a one-car garage that is attached to the house and a large three-car garage that is separate. The big garage is well lit with a light that turns on when someone walks into it, and it is now very close to the house. I put a light with a motion sensor on the back of the house so I can see what's happening in the field. Behind me is a big field that goes all the way from my garage to the woods. The field is full of weeds and thick brush. I can't cut it down. I don't have small children or pets, so I don't really need to mow. I would have to mow it for at least 2 hours. Anyway, my motion sensor has partially lit up something in my field on 2 different occasions. I think it's a Dogman, which is a creature with the head of a wolf and the body of a human. When I was washing dishes in the kitchen sink, it set off my motion sensor. My kitchen sink has a window that looks out into my backyard. I saw this thing crawling across my field on all 4s. It stopped suddenly, turned around, and went back the way it had come, as if it had been called. I didn't hear or see anything that would have told me it was happening. Maybe it was a frequency that was too high for me to hear. That happened not too long ago. In late May? The other time I saw it. A few years ago, it was winter, and there was snow everywhere. Now, it doesn't snow in Virginia as often as it used to. Well, at least the kind that stayed on the ground for days. But I think we got about 10 or 12 inches of snow, which is a lot for us. I was sitting in my chair in the family room watching Laura Ingraham on Fox when the motion sensor went off. It was really bright because it was lighting up all the snow in the field. This time, I saw it standing on its back legs in the middle of my field. It was turning its head like a dog does when the motion light goes on. Like it scared it, it walked around for a while, then got down on all 4s and ran into the woods behind my house. I don't know what's going on, but it can't be safe to be outside here. Even more so when things like these are around. I don't know what they're doing with them, like training them or breeding them, but I know they're here. I don't always see them. I've seen them twice in the last 3 or so years, as I said. So they are either getting out or not listening, no matter what they are doing. A neighbor of mine 3 houses down has also seen it. Just last year, he saw one. How do you explain what you see? Do you think they have some kind of power over them? Small Black Square, hi Donovan, I've been watching your channel for a while, and I'm finally sending in my story about meeting not 1 but 2 Sasquatch. I know it's hard to believe, but I also put in a picture I took that day. This took place in 2007. I was hiking in Glacier National Park, which I do a lot since I live just over an hour from the park. This happened around 4 in the afternoon as I was going down Mount Cleveland. I didn't make it to the top that day, but I have before. I just enjoyed the hike. I began to go down when I couldn't help but notice that the trees below me were moving. I was standing on this lookout, and I could see down into the trees, where it looked like something was walking around. At first, I thought it was a bear because grizzly bears lived in the area. I stood very still to see what would come out of the brush, but nothing has come out yet. I thought there might be bear cubs, which made me even more afraid to move forward. I didn't want to make a mother bear angry. But after looking at it for a while, it seemed much bigger than a bear. It also didn't look like it was walking smoothly, which meant it was ducking in an awkward way. From what I could see, it was also moving around on its back legs for a long time. I could also see that it was moving around on its back legs for a long time. It was hard to tell through the trees, but I could catch glimpses of it. I stayed there for a while longer, and it seemed to be moving away. So, I kept going down the trail. After a few minutes, I heard something step out from behind a tree to my right. I didn't think what I was seeing was real. My mouth dropped open in a gasp, and that was the only thing that moved on me. It was only about 20 feet away, but it was looking right at me. It had to be a lot taller than 6 feet. Its face had some fur on it, but not as much as the rest of its body, which looked like someone took a bear's skin, and stretched it all over this thing. The arms looked like they were very long and almost reached the knees. I just froze. I didn't want to move quickly or seem like I was threatening it, because, let's face it, I wasn't. If it wanted to, this thing could tear me in half. It moved a few steps toward me, grunted a little, and never took its eyes off of me. The second thing I thought was how fascinating it was to see such a strange creature right in front of me. This thing was definitely a cross between a person and a Bigfoot. It was big, but it wasn't as big as I thought it would be. I stood as still as I could and didn't make any noise. It turned around and started to walk away, and then a bigger one came out of the woods and joined it on the trail. This one was huge, at least twice as wide as the last one I saw. They both looked at me for a few seconds, then turned around and kept walking into the woods. I was so shocked at this point that all I could do was stand there and not move. I was confused about what to do. Do I need to run? Should I not move? If I started running, what would they do? Would they try to catch me? I slowly turned around and headed back up the trail toward the overlook. They never did anything to be mean to me. They did nothing but watch me leave. As they walked away, I had the sense to take a picture with my phone. Please remember that this is the file that came with the email. Once they were out of sight, which took about 2 minutes because they were moving so slowly, I took this picture with a bad camera on my Palm Centro. I kept going down the trail toward my car. Since I first saw them, I've been very interested in them. It was definitely scary, but it was really cool to see 2 of them at the same time. Anyway, thanks for reading my story, and keep doing what you're doing well. Small black square, this happened in Yellowstone in the fall of 2015. I got out of my car into the cool air of Yellowstone National Park early in the morning. After hours of driving, I was finally here. As I walked to the visitor center, I couldn't help but admire the view and think how lucky I was to finally be here. I had always wanted to visit this park. After a quick stop at the visitor center, I got back in my car and drove along the well-marked road to my final destination. As I drove through the park, I started to see signs of life, a deer walking along the side of the road and a bald eagle sitting in a tree high up. I drove for a while until I stopped at a lookout point, where I got out to enjoy the fresh air. I got out of the car and walked to the edge of the cliff, where I could see the river valley below. This day, probably because of the time of year, there weren't many people around, so I decided to take my time and enjoy the view without being bothered. I was standing there when the ground started to rumble, and then I heard a loud noise coming from behind me. I turned around when I heard a sound that didn't seem like it belonged in the park. I saw an animal standing there. It was only standing on two legs, and its long arms were down and straight next to it, making it look like it was facing me. Its body was covered in a dark black fur, but it looked dirty and matted, so the fur might have been a lighter color, but I didn't care about the color at the time. I was very scared. My heart skipped a beat because I knew this wasn't normal, and was clearly something I'd never seen before in my life. When I think back, I literally don't know what to do. I'm pretty sure it was smaller than a grizzly bear, but it was definitely a bigger animal at the time. It felt like it was towering over me, and it had two long, pointy ears and fangs that stuck out of its mouth. After looking at me for a few seconds, the thing slowly turned around and walked away. I just stood there, trying to figure out what I had just seen and wondering if I was going crazy. I thought that it would be best to just leave. So I got back in my car, and don't be surprised if I keep going to where I was going. I mean, I had been looking forward to this trip for years and wasn't about to give up on it. Along the way, I saw Ranger stopped on the side of the road, so I decided to stop and tell her what had happened. I told her what I had seen when I got out of my car. She kind of laughed at me. She said that it was probably just a big bear or maybe a coyote, but that I was lucky that it left me alone if it was either of those. She said it could have been a lot worse if I had done something to start it. I'm not that stupid, so I wouldn't do something like that. But I was also mad that she didn't take what I said seriously. Her answer made me feel like an idiot. I wanted to argue with her, but I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew what I saw, and I was sure it was something I'd never seen before. I mean, coyotes can't walk on two legs for a short time like bears can, but they also don't run away like whatever this thing was. It scared me, and it made me wonder what else is in the park that I don't know about. So, I got back in my car and drove along the road as it wound through the park. I have to say that I kept looking over my shoulder for that thing. I couldn't get it out of my mind that it was very scary. I was sure that I would see one or more of those things again. I thought that if there was one, there must be more. But they never came back, and it took me a few hours to get to my destination. Lastly, it makes me feel bad to say it, but I let that situation get to me. I had to cut a few days off of my trip in the end. I just could never calm down enough, though. Where it happened was hours away from where I was staying. I've told myself I'll go back to Yellowstone, but the next time I'll go with a group. It's too tiring to try to be on guard all the time. Totally on your own. Tell me in the comments what you think of these stories. Don't forget to check out my true crime channel, where I post new videos a few times a week. Thank you, and be careful.